Welcome to Unmasking the Trans Movement with Jon Uhler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Tonight, a great show. We're going to talk in depth about the trans shooter in British Columbia. Mental health is not a gender, and Mark Carney has stood in front of, the fake media again and sheds tears, all transitioning his daughter at the age of 13 at the Tavistock Clinic in England. What normal parent does this to his child? There's lots of scandal that's been happening around the world, and Donald Trump has obviously made an effort to try to clean some of that up throughout the United States. Obviously, Canada's still affected, and due to this tragedy, we know that we need to start discussions here in Canada in a different way. We've seen it happen all across the United States, and now this tragedy here in Canada obviously needs to be exposed here as well. It's starting not only with the government, it branches down to the schools, school boards, the whole education system, and we're going to get into it with Jon Uhler and Dr. Ann Gillies. So let's bring them into the program right now. Great to have both of you here tonight with us. I know that you're both concerned about where Canada is headed. Jon, you've seen this in the States countless times over the past 5 years. This is just getting worse. It's not getting better. And somehow it's now crossed borders and it's starting to happen in Canada. And as it does, Canadians need to be aware and take action. And again, not only parents, but also the government and educators all across this country. Great to have you back, Jon.
Well, thank you. And Ann, I'm so glad to be on with you. We're sorry for this occasion, but I can't think of anybody better right now to address this than you. And I guess me and you together, but you are there. You're a voice of reason and now comfort. You're extending that to parents. Our hearts go out to these parents and those that have been harmed, right? Our hearts break for this. And that's why we even started working together, you, Ann, you and me, and then Brad has been good enough, right? That we do this. We don't do this out of monetary gain. We do it because people are important, kids are important, and now kids and people have been harmed.
That's right. And, as we hear of the parents whose children were murdered, it is so heartbreaking. And then on the other side, the mainstream media, talking about how this young man was bullied and all of those things, and we needed to be kinder to him and all of that. But the reality is that gender identity doesn't lie within the body. It is a condition of the mind, and it's a disorder of the mind. And so this young man, in his early teens, began to transition, probably around the age of 12, we think. And he was encouraged to do it. And that's a problem in Canada, because in other parts of the world, sorry, I've got a bit of frog tonight, other parts of the world, this is no longer being looked at as acceptable. In fact, it's being shut down in many areas medically. And so Canada, though, is still on the steamroller, and this is the result that we're seeing. I think, Jon, you can allude to this too, that when you put a young person, in this case, an adolescent, on puberty blockers and then estrogen, you're going to have some reactions. He was also on SSRIs for depression, and
what's an SSRI, Dr. Ann? Just spell that out for our general viewers.
Serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So it means that it's a medication that helps a person feel better, like their mind is more. Maybe even Jon can talk to that too. It's this drug that kind of will stabilize the unhappiness, and make people just a little bit more able to deal with life.
There's a happy pill, and I don't have it yet. What's going on with that?
Happy pill, yeah. Well, it doesn't quite work like that, and there's side effects.
No, that's right.
Side effects, lots of them. So even to having hallucinations, a lot of anxiety. That's a common side effect. So you trade depression for anxiety, instead of dealing and treating the actual disorder, right? We treat the symptoms. And so, yeah. And so this young man he wasn't treated for the mental health conditions, which often happens with anyone. Once these kids say, I think I'm trans, it's like people's mind go out the window, like the psychologists, psychiatrists, medical doctors. Oh, okay, well, then we need to get you on that track and get you, on these drugs. That's exactly what happens. And I'm not kind of just ad-libbing. They just so quickly put them on and never deal with the underlying issues.
So parents are the same situation as the doctors that are promoting it and the teachers, the educators.
Some parents.
Yeah.
I think parents are caught, right, John? Parents are really caught in the middle. And for parents who maybe have some mental health issues themselves, it's easy for them to not only just go along with this with their kids, but they get some attention, especially some of the moms. This becomes a way of finding your place in the world. I have a trans kid. And getting acceptance, it's so convoluted, really.
Right. There's accountability and responsibility for all of this, too. So does that fall on, obviously it does fall on multiple entities, but government plays a role because government ultimately hits our education system. And that's something that, you've witnessed the change in the States, John. Let me ask you, John, the universities in the United States right now, we're under a directive for the past 4 or 5 years until Donald Trump got into power and made the decision to, stop all of this nonsense. And as that's happened, I saw a video just last night that is out there circulating of individuals who are still working at these universities and colleges across the United States on these campuses. And this is the recruiting office or the administration office who's front office staff are basically telling kids that DEI, just because Donald Trump has said no to it, they're still following along. They've done the same thing that Alvin Louis has brought to our attention on Unmasking the Trans Movement before, which is really changing the definitions of words, the definitions of meanings that fall in line with what they want to see happen. And they're doing the same thing now, John, with the colleges and universities. No, we've dropped all the DEI stuff, but have they really?
Right, and Brad, you speak to the issue that Ann, you just referenced, which is looking at, first of all, issues of culpability, issues of what are the contributing factors, meaning who's responsible for this? First and foremost, it's the shooter. We got to make that clear. Okay, it is the shooter. But as most people allow our minds to go, how did this happen? Okay, so now we're looking at contributing factors. Why? Well, place responsibility where it belongs. So that would be personal injury and tort issues. But then also, how do we prevent this? And that's where it is important to look at, and for each of us to assess. We're on both sides of the border here. What leads to this sort of thing? Because if we don't know, then we can't prevent it. And I hope everybody has a sense. Unfortunately, this has to be taken seriously, and it grows. This, whether you have copycat situations or you have more and more troubled teens that grow into young adults. And just as we saw in the U.S. now, Canada has school shooters. And is it something that, it's a copycat or is it migrating? I tend to not think so, but whatever somebody's perspective is, for the sake of kids, for the sake of public safety, we better get this right, or it's going to be replicated. And so hopefully that's where our program, our discussion can come in. But Brad, you just spoke to the issue of part of the problem are agenda-driven individuals that, I'll use a phrase, to hell with whatever may come of it. We have a mindset.
Yes.
And so this DEI is really cover for the woke. They've just changed the terminology. What is woke? It's really everything anti-Judeo-Christian. And I'm not bringing religion. It's a ethos. It's a value system that says life is valuable and people are responsible for what they do, but life is valuable. People are valuable. And how are we going to treat them, as well as there's certain ways to run a family, a society, healthy boundaries, as well as understanding that we are our brother's keeper, and what we do has an influence, and ideas matter that can influence. And so you take a set of ideas that are rooted in anything goes, whatever feels good, right? Subjective reality, there's no objective reality. Now the individual is the sole arbiter of what they're going to do, and if you feed them full of the idea that their own feelings and their happiness is what's most important in life, well, then now they become myopic, and then they become narcissistic, and now they will take personal any affront to or an attempt to set boundaries on them. And then we have to include the spiritual darkness. So there's a lot of factors in play, and we need to try to unpack, and hopefully in a practical way, I think we can do so, to try to figure out, okay, what happened in this case, but are there common denominators, whether in the US or Canada, what are the common denominators that for public policy and then practice, that if we can address certain things, it will decrease the likelihood of this being repeated?
Well, and this is it, like, if we can address, and what we're finding in Canada, that nobody's addressing it politically. I mean, I do have a political friend who started a new party, and he's addressing it, but he's not in any level of authority over in Canada now at this point. But, our political parties have abdicated their responsibility in this, and there's blood on their hands, because they have been promoting gender ideology and the whole transgender idea that a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man, which is ludicrous. And they don't even know, they can't even answer what is a woman, right? Those kind of questions. And so they've gone so far overboard. And I mean, I heard a term today I thought was very interesting, the sin of empathy. Isn't that interesting? Like, we have gone so far over here. Like, we have to be empathetic to everyone. And what we're doing, I'm not against empathy. I'm against throwing out rational thought in order to
appease
and actually, qualify empathy above any kind of rational thought, and that we just have to kind of think about how these poor people are feeling. Well, if we dealt with the issue to start with, they wouldn't be in the mess they're in.
Yeah, throw your own morals aside and just go along with us because we say so, right?
Yeah. And that's what's happened to the Canadian public, really. So I think we should talk, though, about what happens to the individual. Well, first of all, when you're talking about who should be responsible, the education system, big time. But that's under government authority, right? So it comes down. And so the Department of Education is totally corrupt. Totally corrupted our children's minds. Not all the teachers, but they are instructed all the time to be teaching children, young children, these concepts that you may not be a boy and you may not be a girl. Talk about a spirit of confusion. And so you have that. And then with this young man, one of the things that we know now is that there are so many different side effects to taking estrogen, and to taking any kind of hormones for girls or boys. But males, they actually exhibit testicular shrinkage. So scarring and tissue changes. So you have this kind of thing happening. So no wonder, they're taking the hormones and they're finding, like, look what's happening to me, right? And they want it at one level because, well, this will make me a woman. But, if they start thinking through it, which they all do at some level, they're recognizing this isn't making me female. It's just destroying my male body. And, the tissue samples taken from the surgical removal of the testes shows that there's incredible damage and causes infertility and the high risk of cancer for these young men. So they have high risk of cancer, dangerous blood clots and strokes. This is kind of normal run-of-the-mill side effects for these young men. And it's horrific. Cardiovascular stuff. So who knows what was already happening in his body and his mind. Obviously, I think we're going to show a clip of him in a little while. And his mind, this is someone who is extremely mentally ill. And
right.
Nothing was done. He was taken to the hospital. Where were the doctors? What were they doing with them?
So an article came out that said Strang had been transitioning around the age of 15 to 16. We've heard as young as 12 already that it was
12,
already started
yeah.
at that point. But by 15 and 16, they've got him fully into the program and fully transitioning at that point, which, again, a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old, doesn't matter what age you are, 14, 13, it's a very confusing time. You're trying to find yourself. You're trying to figure out who you are. There's a lot of changes within your body and your mind. And these teachers, the education, the government, they're all kind of like throwing all this onto these kids, and it's sitting on these poor kids' shoulders, and they're struggling, and they don't know who to talk to. Parents don't have the right information at their fingertips. Therapists aren't there to back and help and support.
That's right.
Instead, they're pushing them towards it. Teachers doing the exact same thing. The real accountability is going to fall on a lot of people when that day comes, and I hope that we get there. Families, socials, the whole thing, everybody around them, because this is monetized, and it almost, I guess you talked about it earlier, said that the mom being pro-trans because it's almost something new, something she can connect with her kids, something that she can bring into her home to, I guess, alleviate the lacking of a father figure that went awry. The trouble.
Well, here you go, Brad. This is it. This young man had no father figure that we're aware of in his life.
Right.
Certainly his biological father wasn't involved in his life. And so you have, it's again, the deconstruction of family and the insecurity that comes to a young boy with no male presence. Now, he did have, and this is such a sad thing. He had a stepbrother, so there must have been another man there somewhere. But and who knows what that was all about? What that could have been quite an issue unto itself. But here he kills his mother, he kills his stepbrother, and then goes on a shooting rampage in a school. So, and they called him, first of all, a woman. The police called him a woman with dark hair and wearing a dress.
Yeah, female in a dress with brown hair. Yeah. Then went gender neutral. Gun person was how the media displayed it. But obviously the motive is still unknown, of course.
But the police described everyone else according to their proper sex designation, male or female. Everybody else. So you have this kind of doublespeak going on that confuses people. But I think what's happening now, I think there will be a big backlash out of this, because people are starting to go, wait a minute, what's going on here? And I know, John, we've talked about this before, because we had a show on the Nashville shooter, and people were saying, well, this is a female, this is a woman. and everybody's believing it's a woman. There have been no mass murders by women ever. At least that's what I've been reading. And so I don't know if
I
you
think
know of it.
the one gal that went into that
Church.
the church.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's about the only one. So when you look at the difference, and if you've learned anything different, but the times, the percentage, it's just not even comparable. That it's
Which one was that in the church?
That was in the Nashville.
Minneapolis.
I think it was Nashville, but it's very rare. So I think that was the Nashville case that we looked at. But again,
we did an episode on that right after that happened as well, and we wanted to talk about that because it was a female, and that doesn't happen. We hadn't seen that happen yet. And
That
was
the only one that we're aware of. So again, to your point, and it's almost always male.
Yes.
And so that matters. And one of my greatest concerns, and it's echoed by the two of you, no doubt, which is, there's multiple factors, but again, the issue is how do we prevent, how do we stop this? How do we bring the issues, how do we decrease the likelihood that this is going to repeat? So we've got to look at all contributing factors. So we've got family issues, but the one thing that I think is the common denominator is you have a kid that is quote unquote being transitioned. Well, what does that mean? It basically means that you have adults that are sending a message to a kid that is confused, or maybe he wasn't even confused at first. Now we're going to confuse the most basic of issues. Now there goes reality testing. And once they hit their early prepubescent or just into puberty, now you've got hormones going on. Now the trans movement by nature toys with the endocrine system. So now we got the physical and emotional issues. But the dirty little secret in my estimation is the introduction of pornographic material.
Yes.
And it is that opens up a very dangerous doorway. Not only, and this is where we'll look at a video, and the question is, are we going to be seeing mental illness, or it used to be very common in Western world, though it's fallen out of favor now, to even consider anything spiritual.
This looks like demonic possession to me, but that's
okay.
Right.
And so, the guys that I worked with, there were a number of them, as far as in prison, that without exceptions, the ones that were in for life, that were in because they committed heinous sexual offenses. You work in solitary confinement long enough, you're going to eventually. That's why it really matters how you do research with sex offenders. Just sit across the table for a few hours. You're not going to get it's just the nature of the beast, so to speak. You've got to spend a lot of time. You just have to spend a lot of time before you're finally going to hear them say, you know what, let me share something with you I've never shared before. Okay, then you got something. And without exception, those that had done significant harm sexually to women and kids talked about something would come over them. I even had a guy that it wasn't a sexual related, his was a workplace violence issue, and he was jealous of his wife. Wife started having an affair, and he remembers driving to the parking lot of her workplace, and he talked about how something came over him. He walks in, he shoots her point blank. Apparently she survived. He walks back out, puts a gun to his head in the parking lot. He survived. He's partially paralyzed, but he remembers the thing coming out of him. So we are naive. We're really one of the few countries in the world, or North America. The rest of the world has no problem speaking in terms of a spiritual realm. We've become so scientific that we've dismissed that, and therefore now everything's going to be mental health. Now, there's mental health issues, but when we watch what we watch, or what
evil,
it's this combination. If you and it allows for predators. So that's the other concern. So these kids are ripe to be groomed, and then if you get them into pornography, especially for the male mind, will start to reach out and grab a kid and open doorways. Look at Ted Bundy, what he talked about. He got hooked on something.
Sorry, John. This young man had been into anime. So, he just more recently. So there's so much stuff here, but you're absolutely right. And we I mean, most people actually come to the place where they will acknowledge that there is some evil, like this is an evil thing or something, but they don't recognize that this might be a spirit, or could be a spiritual um, you know,
Connection?
well, a spiritual connection. And I can't even think of the word. They're not oppressed, they are oppressed, but they're demon possessed.
Spiritual possession. There you go.
Right? So we do know, and so here's part of the huge concern. Along with mental health issues, we've got family dynamics. I mean, you can take a kid that had no issues with gender and start to create issues. If you start to make them question or put stuff in front of them, kids are able to be influenced. But two huge factors that those in positions of leadership in Canada, still in the U.S., quite frankly, need to wrestle through, for those of us that have worked with wounded kids as well as troubled individuals, is what are you going to do? Are you helping or starting to potentially cause a problem if you introduce porn and pornographic material into the life of a kid? And ultimately, you're going to have to ask yourself the question, leaders are, is this worth it? So pornography can reach out and grab a kid. So you can either introduce it or a kid gets into it. Do we need to help the situation by piling on? The trans movement is by nature sexually deviant. Yeah. So it encourages deviance, and then that in and of itself makes them easy prey for and ripe for being groomed and exploited. So those that are going to be accessing the adults then, so on a sexual and sexuality level, we now have introduced issues. And if that opens up the doorway then to very dark spiritual stuff, well, do we want to keep encouraging this? I don't think so.
Well, and that's exactly what you said, the right thing. It opens their spirit to dark things. And then you add, when we haven't talked about this, you add illegal drugs. Because we know that drugs are very much part of this whole epidemic with trans individuals, that they're encouraged. And so this young man on prescription meds, SSRIs, and at least those, and then estrogen, and then whatever else he may have had to be on because he had other physical ailments caused by the hormones, and then throw in some, weed maybe, but maybe something, heroin, who knows what he was on. And so the mind at some point can snap. Right? And so there's this whole, it's like this evil, demonic, spiritual stuff, physical stuff, and the mental stuff. And it's just, they're ripe for any of this kind of stuff. So I'm really concerned what we're going to see over the next few years, because
we'll watch this video. And I was just also thinking, a couple other contributing factors. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on politically speaking, if you start having a kid focus on him or herself so much so that they become the arbiter of, it's all about feelings.
Yes.
You are going to foster selfishness, myopia. Okay, so now you have this increasing degree of self-centeredness that it's me, I matter more than, don't you dare, encroach upon my thing. So they start to become extremely, there's no other way to put it, extremely narcissistic. So we're growing little narcissists. And then if there has been hurt in the past, or you take a narcissist, either way, hurt in the past is going to bring about anger. So you may have residual anger that's not being looked at, and if anger is not dealt with properly, it can become resentment and bitterness. or if you feed somebody's ego, you will generate resentment, especially if boundaries are placed upon you. And so you're going to see then this growing self-centeredness, this growing agitation, this growing anger. And now we've described what we're seeing within the trans movement, especially among guys. And so why don't I play for us? And let's play this clip.
Hold on to your seats.
Right? The viewers can decide for themselves, what are we dealing with here from what Ann and I just shared here.
Wow.
It is so, it's horrifying to watch. You think about this young person and you watch his eyes. He's, to me, he's hallucinating, or hearing voices. Maybe.
All right. Or how about We Are Legion? We certainly know, it's to your point. And we got something. This young person ain't right in the head.
He's looking.
Right. And I noticed the red marks. I don't know what that's about. He seemed to have marks across as a matter of fact, I'll just quickly, we'll go back to that. We won't play it. Don't worry about that. But look at the, you wonder what, I don't know. I don't know what would make those marks. That's very strange to have a mark,
The one on his hand looks like a burn almost.
Right.
But yeah, self-inflicted, self-injurious, which is another, spiritual issue, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was maybe lipstick. He was smearing himself with lipstick, but
could be. It looked like a burn, but it might be because it goes across the hand. Like who knows? I mean, I don't.
So you've got another couple of pictures there, John, and you'll see in those pictures he's got red on his face as well. Again, there's been some confusion, you guys, about which pictures are legitimate and which pictures aren't legitimate. There's been him at an older age and then a younger age, and it's tough to decipher what's really going on here. And I don't want to put any blame on the wrong person. So, and nor do we want to have to retract this episode later. But we're trying our best to try to clear up the imperfections of what's coming out with this story. And there's a lot of speculative stuff and a lot of confusion as to what's right and what's wrong. So
so whether lipstick or not, there's something that we see. Now, the primary thing is the condition, the mental. We certainly can safely say that person's not right in the head. But now the question is the only option we have psychosis?
Right.
If we were to ask somebody, what might demon possession look like? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's some pictures of the shooter. I think, is that Brad? That kind of looks like what we're...
Yeah, that's one of them for sure. That is the right individual as far as what I've been able to decipher over the last few days. There's some other pictures out there that they've got a little bit heavier set man dressed as a woman. Again, there's some confusion whether or not that's him at 18 or what, but...
So let's look at the other side of the coin here, the victims. Innocent children. What's your thought, John, when we see these individuals go after children in a school setting? Like, this is really disturbing. I mean, you can't unsee and you can't unhear and you can't begin to even imagine the pain that those parents are going through.
9 children died that day, and then Jesse decided to take his own life. He had already taken his mom and his stepbrother's life as well. So out of the whole day, 35, 37 people are left in a place of pure tragedy. It's very heartbreaking. And that's a great question.
A community of, I think, about 2,400 people. So it's, for them in northern BC, this is unimaginable. Something like this happening in a small community is like the community I live in. Every single person in that community is attached to somebody else in the community that has lost someone, so the whole community grieves. The whole community is invested, in the lives of these families. And it's so debilitating for everyone involved.
And as you had asked, what goes through my mind is, if we are going to just view this as a mental health issue, so we can have a couple of different perspectives. Each are worth considering. Right?
Yep.
So the guy just went crazy. Okay. Well, he had enough on the ball to load a weapon and carry a weapon, and okay. But crazy people do that, but more psychopathic, of course. Why did he choose the target he chose? From what I've read, this was his former school. Am I reading that?
I think
properly?
so, yeah. Yeah.
It was his former school.
Okay, so we either have one of two options we can conclude. If it's just strictly something wrong with his thinking or mental health, which would influence that, of course. We either have that he knew somebody at the school, so he was trying to take a particular person out, or he didn't like how he was treated way back when.
And that's been alluded to by the media, that he was bullied. He never fit in. Hey, I get it. That was my whole school experience. And this goes back to what you said about, self-focused, hyper self-focused. And you get teenagers that are self-focused anyways. And then you get these individuals who are so inward focused, they can't get their mind out of that, and they have no life. They have absolutely no life, because when you're that self-focused, you don't think about anybody else, and you don't care about anybody else. All you care is getting your thoughts and your needs met, and kind of to hell with everybody else. That's their whole life. It's so sad.
And it starts to grow. There's a video, we see him at a gun range. Okay, so what do guns do for anyone? Hopefully good things, as far as self-defense, confidence. But if you have anger, right now, and if you don't feel good about yourself, and if you want to start to think in terms of wreaking vengeance, my guess is, if we look at his online activities, where he went, he probably went to violent video games. Wonder what kind of music, as well as, I just know there's going to be pornographic sites. Yeah. That's again my concern about the trans stuff. That you had, if you do a close enough search, there is no doubt that an older adult somewhere along the way influence this guy into the cross-dressing end of things, into AGP kind of stuff. Okay, so we have this increasing myopia, this anger. He's now going back to a school that he was at, but why didn't he just shoot the former principal if he still knew the principal? Why the kids? Well, could be mental illness, but by the time, and what we saw in that video, by the time this happens, anger has grown. And we cannot any longer afford, I believe, in our society to ignore the spiritual. And so, to me, the thing that makes sense, and what we saw in that video, is the one thing Satan, first of all, wants to do is steal and destroy. We know that the thief comes to steal and destroy. He's like a roaring lion looking who he's going to consume. But he also, and you see this now in the Epstein files, a lot of people are now starting to access and read about the Epstein files, and they can't comprehend. And they shouldn't be able to comprehend, but they're learning because it's incomprehensible. Now, those of us that have worked with survivors that have gone through stuff like that, I've now have worked with folks like that for a couple of years. So unfortunately, I'm now seeing what a number of my clients have gone through, that kind of stuff. What you see with when somebody sells themselves or gives themselves over to evil, when they harmonize, when they've become so psychopathic, that just means so selfish.
Yes.
That they have overridden their conscience. There's no breaks. There's no empathy. There's no remorse. Biblically, we used to call that a fool, interestingly enough. So depraved, reprobate, those are metallurgy terms. They're no longer good for anything. It's the dross you get rid of on the silver that now is not good for anything. If you build a bridge, you don't want to use a piece of metal that's called reprobate. It no longer is good for its intended purpose. The mind no longer works normally. It doesn't value life. It doesn't value good and bad. Everything's inverted. Then you harmonize with darkness, real, what we would say demonic entities. They get off on, meaning the host, so they get energized, the demonic individual, the entities, and the individual, they get off on the trauma they can inflict, especially upon those that are closest to God's heart. Those are those that are vulnerable, the poor, the disenfranchised, the women and children. But also, children reflect God's image more. They're more innocent. So they're going to go after kids because they're wiping out, they're defacing innocence. They're going after God's heart, and it causes the most emotional damage.
Yes. Yeah. And another thing I've been thinking as you were talking, John, is that these young people who have become so disillusioned with society, with the family, with everything, they're simply looking for someone to blame for all of the mess that they're in. And they can't, they don't know God, who is God, and their whole psyche is absolutely turned upside down. And then we know that Satan uses all of that. And so the mess is just so huge that, unless God were to intervene, like right in the moment, there's no stopping them. And that's what's so scary. Their anger is energized by demonic activity.
Well, as you both know, this situation isn't going to just end here. It's a situation that has regurgitated itself throughout the United States for, the past 5 years, and we've seen tragedy after tragedy, and this is Canada's first tragedy, and I hope it's its last, but I'm not quite as confident as I should be maybe on that statement, because I know that the first one in the States didn't change anything. It seems that it gave others a mission and a purpose. And that's the scary thing, is that as one does it, others feel as though it's acceptable. The outcome was tragic, but the only outcome was death at the end of this one. We don't see a trans shooter typically live, do we, John?
No, that's a good question, right? Some do, some don't, but I think the majority take their own life. A little bit, there's kind of a difference, I think, in the psyche of some of them, and spiritually speaking. So those that tend to take their own life are either very narcissistic or myopic, or had become a host to a lot of things. I used to deal with some of the guys in prison, and one thing you look for, it's kind of interesting, like the Aurora, Colorado shooter. That was the movie theater as well as one of the schools up there. Sometimes if you hear of a shooter sort of vomiting, very interesting. And there's a couple of scenes where I think the Aurora, Colorado shooter was in the investigative room, or where they're doing their questioning of him. And by himself, he's talking to him, or it looks like he's talking to himself. They said he was crazy. But I think it was this same kind of situation. If a guy, for whatever reason, was possessed, but then the demons, in my estimation, the demons left, you're going to find that the shooter is absolutely shocked at what happened, and they'll vomit. It's kind of an interesting thing.
Out with the bad, in with the new, right?
Yeah.
Wow, what a transition to go through. These poor kids, they're transitioning in so many different ways, and they don't even realize what's really going on, from a spiritual level to a physical level to a emotional level to support levels around them. So tragic, so tragic. Dr. Ann, any final thoughts for today on this episode? This is a tough episode to do every time. You know, these are not the way we want to present the trans movement by any means, and we try to unmask it and show the world what this is really about. But without these situations, I think we'd be left with a real lack of being able to show the deviation, the deviance, the tragedy that comes at the end of all of this. Can anybody say anything good about what's going on in this world that way with this trans movement? Because I can't find anything positive at all. And if it's so negative all the time, why are we allowing it to continue?
Yeah, well, that's the question. And I think it won't change until parents across the nation and people who have right thinking, normal thinking, and that's a terrible word to say, isn't it? Normal thinking.
But it's appropriate.
It is. That begin to stand up. And it may be that this very situation, as horrible as it is, begins to wake people up to the reality that if we don't do something soon to stop this kind of indoctrination, we are going to see more and more upheaval and more murder. We're going to see more violence. It's going to happen.
That's going to take place in November with a government change, hopefully, when we get into elections. School board officials that need to be, removed, and others that need to sit in those chairs. We need some adults back in the room, is what I like to say. We need
that's it.
Big boy pants on here, and some dads and men saying no. I mean, Dr. Ann, you brought it up many times on this program before. Men have to start being men again and start being so less effeminate, right?
Yeah. And no more caving to the, white male patriarchal, as though that's something evil.
Right.
I mean, can anything be used against another person? Of course. But it's men being men and taking their rightful place in the home and being the fathers they were meant to be and the husbands they were meant to be will change the whole dynamic.
John, bring us home, buddy.
I couldn't say it better than what Ann just said. We need to. The U.S. is not out of the hole, right? All it would take is another administration like the Biden administration. So until we eradicate the vocabulary and the mentality behind it, so until we eradicate the word trans, we're not eradicating people. We're eradicating this lie.
Yes,
okay, there are just male and female. Right. And the way you were born is the way you were supposed to be born. And let's work on helping you be the best you can be, not eradicate and erase yourself. Because you deserve a life, you deserve to know God and the plan He has for you. He has good things. And ultimately that lies in being useful in the service of others. And that is in protecting those that are more vulnerable and positively contributing, not this message that we're giving to kids.
Talk to your kids. Make sure you have conversations with them. If you see them headed in this direction and you know it's not right, you need to have that discussion. We're not saying that every kid doesn't deserve to be treated fairly, but the reality is that this is a deviant side of a future that you don't want your kids involved with, and you don't want yourself involved in it either, for that matter, as moms and dads. Grandparents, you need to talk to your kids who have kids of their own now, And those discussions need to continue too. It's not just a parent talking to their child. Grandparents need to step in and say, look, this wasn't right a long time ago and it's not right now. And, good morals and ethics come from elders. And we've learned that throughout the course of time. And, we're all in our 60s, 70s here, and we understand that, we've got that experience and that life that we've lived and we've seen. And sodomy was never, ever acceptable prior to 5 years ago. And now it's a regular daily thing, and it's an occurrence where young girls are saying that having sodomy performed on them is a form of birth control. And that's really wrong in the worst possible way that you could possibly think of. And then you've got boy on boy, and that's just, again, how can the government, the schools, the educators, is the world possessed, or is it what? Like, wow, blows my mind.
We've become a godless nation. We've become a godless nation, and when we threw God out of the schools and out of the family, this is what we're seeing. And really, it's only a returning to those roots of faith, family, and freedom that are going to bring us back into health and wholeness.
Well, as a dad who didn't participate in that over many years, while I did bring my family up, my kids up to learn and know the Lord and Jesus, and they went to, Catholic schools along the way a couple of times throughout their schooling. But at the end of the day, the message doesn't have to be godly. It doesn't have to all come back to God necessarily as you're talking to your kids. Sometimes that can be intimidating to kids, especially if their parents don't speak like that and they're not as godly as they want to be. But there's another way to communicate this, and maybe that's for another show. But that communication that is really, I guess, the most important part, because a kid will take a stand and, well, no, my friends, my teachers, everybody's telling me it's okay except you. And that means that you're on the wrong side, and that finger pointing has to stop. We have to change that. And again, parents, don't be intimidated. Don't back down. Stand your ground. Mm-hmm. Let your kids know how you feel. Let your kids know that there is a right and wrong to all of this. And let's move forward and try to see if we can get our society back on track. And the sooner we end this trans nonsense, the sooner we're going to be in a better position all around the world. Thank you very much for being here today. We can't do this without either one of you. We have to wrap it up. As we know, we've limited time. We're coming up on an hour now. And we said 30 minutes to begin with, but you always go overboard because there's just so much to delve into. And again, this is knowledgeable information for parents, for grandparents, for viewers, kids as well. I mean, we haven't said anything on the show that kids don't need to know too. Sit your kid down, let them take a watch of this episode as well. There's information here that will help support them and help give them the maybe clarity that they need going forward, or at least a chance to hear from somebody else who's helping them with that confusion and that trouble of not understanding. Because at 14, 15, 13, 12, there's a better way. It's not puberty blockers, and it's sure as heck isn't turning transgender. It's getting your head screwed on right through the proper process of mental health, and parents who understand that communicating the right message is going to be key going forward. And the trans movement is definitely not that, as you both have well laid out here today again. So thank you very much, everyone, being on the show. We'll get back sometime soon here with another episode on unmasking the trans movement. The best to both of you. God bless both of you. And we'll see you both soon.
Thanks, Brad.